if you want to support the show, any of the shows, either this or whichever show, I'm not on right now because this is just a blanket ad for all of them, and the website, you can go to bewareofspoilers.com. In the description for any of the episodes of Beware of Spoilers, there is the option to donate. If you don't want to donate that way, you can donate directly through the website. We do have that, mwpnews.com. And if you don't want to support that way, then going to mwpnews.com will help out because we have ads there. We don't want to keep it, where there's a lot of ads. There's a few ads. But the point is we want to make it so that way, we can sustain this for the long term. If people donate, we're never going to paywall anything, I don't think, as of right now. But if people start donating, we'll start doing cooler and cooler stuff. Like donations are how we get to cover stuff like Tribeca and other, film festivals. And, we may be able to bring on more people to help out. So if you want to help out the show and you want more content from us, by all means, even just going and giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify helps out a lot. But that's it. That's the only ad we'll have on the podcast ever. But here's whatever podcast you're going to be listening to. Good evening, and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. I have just seen Twisters, and I have two big takeaways, and they're probably not the takeaways you'd expect, because it's not like I went into this with, I don't want to say I went into this with very low expectations. I saw Twister for the first time, like, a few days ago, right before I recorded the episode of 30-minute reviews for it, and I was, it's a solid movie. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. I'm saying it's a solid movie. I saw this today, and I was like, I don't know what my expectations were for this. I didn't have particularly high expectations. I was thoroughly entertained. I mean, I think this is going to fall into the usual, schlock of forgettable movies that we get every year, where it's like, when we get to the end of the year and we go through our top 10, I don't think Twisters is going to be on anyone's. I mean, it might be on Peter's. But I don't want to speak for him, having, just seen the movie, and he hasn't yet. But I looking at this, I don't think this is going to make my top 10. I don't think this is going to even be one of those movies that's, on the bubble of the top 10, or in the conversation of the top 10. I think we're looking at a movie that's going to be solidly, it was enjoyable. I don't think this is something that I'm ever going to go back to. I think the one thing that I did think while I was watching it in terms of for the rating is this movie would be fantastic in 4DX, I think. But I digress on that point. I do have a few big takeaways though. Number one, I think that let's talk about the first thing because it's kind of a small thing and I don't want to spend too much time on it, and if I do it last, I invariably will. David Corenswet. I remember after seeing Mission Impossible Fallout just being absolutely floored by the inability to direct by Zack Snyder, because in that movie, Henry Cavill is, spoilers, the bad guy. I mean, they give it away in the trailer when he goes to when he does the thing to reload his fists before fighting before fighting Tom Cruise. There's that moment where, and he's in this movie, he is effortlessly charming, even as the bad guy. He is someone that you are not meant to like. He is still effortlessly charming, and that's just the appeal of Henry Cavill. And he's like that in every movie you see him in. No matter who it is or who he's dealing with, he is effortlessly charming. The only movie that I've ever seen him in where he doesn't have that is Zack Snyder's movies with him as Superman. Outside of that, never seen him, you never see him not, just charming. which is bad, because you have a Superman movie where your Superman's not likable, and congratulations on doing that, Zack Snyder, but it's a choice. And the reason why I bring this up is David Corenswet's in this movie, and he was one of like 3 cast members in this movie that I'm like, oh shit, I knew Anthony Ramos was going to be there, and I've enjoyed him in a lot of things. Daisy Edgar-Jones is another one that like she's been showing up a lot, and I've been enjoying her performances anytime she shows up. Glenn Powell, I've come to become a fan of in recent in recent years, I guess, because it's been very recent, but you know. All of these people have been slowly creeping their way into my, consciousness, and I appreciate what they all bring in this movie. I did not anticipate. I didn't know David Corenswet was going to be in this. I didn't know Katie O'Brien was going to be in this. That was a nice surprise, because I did enjoy her performance in Love Lies Bleeding. And Paul Scheer has a small cameo at the end, and I appreciate Paul Scheer in whatever he shows up in. But David Corenswet, for me, was kind of the standout, because I was aware of him existing as an actor because of his casting as Superman, but I was not aware of... I've never seen him in anything. And I haven't done the deep dive into his filmography to start watching stuff that he's been in to see what kind of performance we can expect out of him. I do have some trust in James Gunn, but seeing him here and seeing the performance he puts on, where he is this bad guy, like he plays like. Let's go into a little bit of the plot. Anthony Ramos is he was a storm chaser with Kate, who's played by Daisy Edgar-Jones, and they were in this tornado, and things go wrong, and all of their crew die except for them two. So that's where you get Kiernan Shipka and 2 others who I don't know who they are, but. All of that said, then years later they reunite, and he is now working for this organization that helps predict where tornadoes are going to be, with the nefarious purpose that they're doing this with the intent that they will sell the information to this big venture capital property company that will use it to be able to better target where to build, condos and stuff that are out of the range of tornadoes, while also selling it to people whose homes have been destroyed. They don't care about stopping the tornadoes, about that. And her whole plan is she wants to figure out how to stop a tornado. So they meet up with this guy who is he calls himself a storm wrangler. His whole thing is he goes out and he rides the storms. That's his whole thing. And he does it on YouTube. He's got a huge following. And then in the aftermath, they go out and they help out at the disaster site to make sure everyone's safe and all that. So you have a cool, it's a cool kind of concept. And you get to the end and it's this super tornado that's happened. But I am, as I'm watching this show, and I've never watched, and obviously I've never seen this movie before, Corenswet plays a guy who works for Anthony Ramos' company. And his whole thing is, look, we're here to do this job. We're here to get this data for this tornado. That way we can sell it to this guy, and they can use it for their product. So all of that said, he plays this guy who's kind of very little personality, not a huge glut of personality of a human. And then on top of that too, not only is he playing that, but he's also playing he has moments where he has these outbursts, and even in this small role, he still has that charm that I'm like, God, this is a great choice for Superman that you have right here. This is an excellent choice. I'm here for this, and he can play. He can play that role. I'm interested to see what happens, with him here in this new role that he's going to be playing. What else have we got that I wanted to address with this? Let's talk about the big thing, which is I saw an article in The Verge about this movie before I went to see it. I tend not to read about the movies I cover before seeing them because I want to go in kind of as fresh as possible. And the article was talking about how on the press tour, the director said that this movie would not be addressing climate change. And they would not be saying that this is because of climate change, and how that's not right. The movie's not going to outright say that. Okay, fine, it's their prerogative. And when you watch the movie, this is a Warner Brothers and Universal co-production. As I'm watching it, you notice that the movie is very middle America coded. It is, look, the movie takes place in Oklahoma, and, Glenn Powell is not from Oklahoma. Is not from Texas. In the movie, he's from Arkansas, but he's still playing the single most Texan man you've ever seen in your life. It's got a country music soundtrack. They go to a rodeo. It's like this movie is as, I don't want to stereotype and say conservative coded, but it is very conservative coded, this movie. That said, this is what I talk about when I say identity politics do kind of ruin deeper interpretation of movies. We talked about this a little bit, both in the mid-year top 5 when I talked about it again, and when in my review of Civil War, where my big concern going into Civil War was that this is going to be an apolitical Civil War movie, which, how do you do that? How do you do a movie about a fictional American Civil War and have it be apolitical? And when you see the map, you're like, oh, that's what they're trying to do. It's trying to be an apolitical movie about a Civil War. And when you watch the movie, that's not the case. And that is kind of the way it is. There is this thing where people apparently need things spoon-fed to them. It's not enough to watch the movie and pick up subtext. And there's a moment in this where I'm like, oh, because that would have been too subtle for people. And it's the moment where it's like they go to the town and they have the shirts and they're like, oh, we're giving away the shirts and they're giving away food and they're selling the shirts, and it's like, yeah, that's why we sell the shirts, is to afford to give away the food. And it's this moment where you're like, I don't need that line said out loud. I can extrapolate that for myself. But it's good, I guess, that you lay that out for anyone who didn't quite understand it. It is what it is. But that is kind of, indicative of the larger problem. It's the same reason why in Infinity War, in Endgame, you have that moment where, right before, they go into, right before they use the set to bring everyone back, he goes, just bring everyone back to this moment. And it's just to lay out for the audience what's going on. And it's like, and why Hulk has to do it. It's because I was made of gamma radiation. Radiation is mostly gamma. It's like, I was made for this. All of that said, this movie doesn't shy away from climate change, which is one of those things, as I'm watching, I'm like, how the fuck do you, as a reporter at The Verge, be like, so what, because it doesn't say outright, it's like, because of human-caused climate change, it's addressed in the movie. It's outright addressed. And that's the thing, is that they say once in a generation storm, once in a generation storm. But Maura Tierney shows up in the middle of the movie, and her whole thing is like, yeah, we've been getting these once-in-a-generation storms more and more frequently. The weather's been getting worse. The droughts have been getting longer. And that's causing the price of stuff to go up. And it's like, yeah, it's outright addressing climate change. It's not saying it's because of climate change, but it's outright addressing the issue of climate change. And in that way, this is a very on-the-surface conservative coded movie, which is what I said. It's like, you got the country music soundtrack. You got, it's a mostly, the two leads are both white. You have a lot of, non-white people in the auxiliary cast or the supporting cast, but, your leads are these two blonde white people, and this movie is very, like I said, conservative coded, but at the same time, it is more liberal in its political leanings. It is a movie about the dangers of climate change and how, using science to combat climate change and the extreme weather that comes as a result of climate change. And that is fundamentally what this movie is about. And then on top of that, too, it's like the B plot, the plot about the business is like, yeah, big business doesn't have an incentive to combat this issue. Big business doesn't want to stop it. They're trying to find new ways to profit on the disaster. They don't care. They're just trying to find new ways to make money. Which is why, as I'm watching this, I had this baffled confusion a good amount of the time at this article that I read. And I'm like, I don't understand how you come to this conclusion. It's the same thing, like I said, with Civil War, where it's like, because we're not bashing you over the head with who the political affiliations of each side are, the movie's apolitical. Here we have a movie that, like, because we're not hitting you over the head with the climate change aspect of it, it doesn't address climate change. That's just factually not true. It does address that issue, and that issue is the core of the movie. Like, the core of the movie is that these things keep happening and they keep getting worse, and they need to try and find a way to stop it. That's what the movie's about. And that is fundamentally, like, to say it's not about that is just a misrepresentation of reality. Like, and then the fact that the sense of bad guy of the movie is not who we would see in the previous entry, where it's like, they're not bad guys in the first entry, the guys who are the Storm Kids. They're kind of just not an antagonistic force, but they're just kind of there. Like, they are in this movie as, you know, look, we are people who are being impacted by this. We are going to help out other people, and we're going to bring attention to it. And the other thing is, like, as they're showing what they're doing, they're giving, like, oh, here's how you survive a tornado. Here's what you do. Here, you know, here's what causes the tornado. Here's what we know about it. Like, I watched that movie, and I was just so baffled by the lack of media literacy. And I think part of it comes from, it's like, we have to look at these movies as more than just the coat of paint that's put on it. It is a very rural coat of paint thrown on this movie. But that does not make it what it's been portrayed as. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed as you know. And the thing is, too, it's like, were you expecting them to? Like, does every movie like this go into the specifics of, like, climate change? Like, Geostorm is a movie where it's like, you know, it's about climate change and how, you know, it is the most extreme version of man-made climate change. They don't outright say that, and Geostorm's not a great movie. Let's just put it out there. I enjoyed it for what it is, but it's not a great movie. But look, I watched this, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough where I left the theater thinking that was a good use of my time. Like, it is enjoyable to watch. I would probably not seek this out to watch again. Like, I have no desire to go home and watch it on streaming when it does hit probably Peacock. It's either going to be Peacock or Max. That'll be an interesting rights conversation at some point in the near future, but I don't know where it ends up. It's either going to be on Max or on Peacock, but probably not going to watch it again. Like, I've seen what I care to see from this movie. So, you know, let's see how it turns. You know, let's see what we have coming, you know, like, next down the line from this. But I don't know. I probably wouldn't watch it again. It's a good one-time watch movie. If you need something to go sit in the movie theater for this weekend, you would not have wasted your time watching this movie. You will have an enjoyable experience at the theater watching this. Which, what more do you expect? I'm not like, you know, next week's Deadpool and Wolverine. So if you don't want to go to a theater and see this, that's understandable. I don't think this movie is bad. I don't think, you know, I just don't, I think this is the epitome of it's the movie equivalent of a guilty pleasure snack, where it's like, it's all empty calories. It's nothing here is going to stick. I'm not going to remember most of it. It's, you know, because it's PG-13, you don't get the same visceral imagery that you could get if it was rated R. And I'm not saying it needs to be gory or anything, but it's like, when all the deaths kind of happen because someone got swept away in a tornado, it's like, oh, bye. Oh, bye. Okay, bye. Like, it doesn't, the things don't land the way that they could, which is a shame. I'm not saying that not saying they need to. I'm not saying we need to watch people get dismembered or anything, but it even makes those things where it's like, oh yeah, they died. Like, there are a few deaths in the movie, but, like, again, it's mostly unnamed people. I don't think that we even get full names for all three of the people who die in the opening sequence. And it is, there are worse movies to watch in a theater. And I think this is a movie that's built for a large screen experience. It's built for a massive, like, IMAX experience or a Dolby, or, I mean, like I said, I feel like this would be a great movie for 4DX. With the moving chairs and all of that. If you want a movie that'll feel like a thrill ride. I do think the effects in this are going to not hold up as well as some of the effects in the original Twister. I think that is kind of one of the things that you risk doing when I don't want to say they're overly reliant on CGI, but they do use CGI a lot more here than they did in the first. And there are some scenes, and there are some weird edits that I'm like, oh, that's an odd choice. I don't know why you would go with that. But it is what it is. I would recommend this. I think we gotta rework our scale, because I would, like, saying it's a 5-star movie feels weird, but it's a 5-star movie because of how we rate our movies, where it's 5 stars, asterisk, because this is a big budget visual effects extravaganza, like, that you must see. It's not an indictment of quality, it's an indictment of what's the best way to watch this movie. And I do think if you're going to go out and see this movie in any way, don't wait for it to go to streaming, don't wait for it to go to don't wait for anything like that. Go watch it in a theater. Like, this is a movie that is like, oh, this is worth seeing in Dolby or in IMAX or in RPX or whatever the format is that you have at your local theater. That's your premium, expensive version of it. That's not the, the cheap one, or a matinee. But I did really, I enjoyed it enough, and I'm, about 20 minutes removed from seeing it, and there are already bits that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like, the entire middle portion of the movie is kind of forgettable. And I think that was something that I said even about Twister, where it's like, I don't remember. Like, I watched it the night before, and I was like, there are entire periods of this movie that I just don't remember. I feel like fucking, what's his name, in Memento. But we'll wrap up there for today. Our next thing we're going to talk about tomorrow morning, we have a new show from animation, from DC Animation. As we wrap up this week with My Adventures with Superman, we also have a new show, Kite Man Heck Yeah, I think it's called, or Kite Man Fuck Yeah, Kite Man, it might be Kite Man Heck Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but either way, that will be starting up this weekend. We'll be watching that tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow. That's a spin-off of Harley Quinn about Kite Man. I think it's supposed to be like Cheers, but in the DC universe, which, fine by me. I'm all for that. And then this is the only movie we have this week. Next week we have Deadpool and Wolverine, and I think also Dee comes to theaters nationwide. So if that's playing at my theater, we'll be talking about Dee next week. But Deadpool and Wolverine next Friday. What else have we got to talk about? I think that's it. I think we've just about covered everything we're going to cover, and until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.